Murder Hornets. On the show today, I have entomologist and science communicator Miles Maxcer to the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Corbin. I'm really excited to be here.
Dude, I am so excited to talk to you, and you just graduated, which congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, but I should tell my audience, so you have been working with insects for well over a decade. You've been keeping ants, which are in the same order as these, hornets, and I just thought you'd be the perfect person to talk about what's going on.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to helping people understand a little bit more about these so-called murder hornets.
Okay, I actually saw the really, really funny post on Facebook that was like, how do I attract murder hornets to live at my neighbor's house?
Well, yeah, there might be some legal issues with that sort of strategy.
Right? Yeah, so let's just talk about it. What is a murder hornet?
So, well, first of all, a murder hornet is a thing that doesn't even exist. So I can tell you that as entomologists, we would never refer to these organisms as murder hornets. That was a title created by, I think, the New York Times. It's not one that's recognized by entomologists. So we know them as Vespa mandarinia. So that's the Asian giant hornet. And the Asian giant hornet is one of the largest insects on Earth. And you look at these things and you're like, this must have been around with the dinosaurs. And we don't really think that to be true, but they're incredible and they're very, very large hornets. So they capture the attention of a lot of people.
Yeah, how big are they? The size I read of like a queen's the size of a matchbox. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fairly accurate. Yeah. So a queen's wingspan is about 3 inches. So these are very large. They're larger than any kind of hornet species that is naturally found in North America.
Wow. And so they're originally obviously from Asia.
That's right. Yeah. So they actually inhabit many Asian countries, including some parts of Russia, but they are not found in North America. They're really quite restricted to Asia and very, very common in Japan. So that's the area that we have studied them the most, where we know the most about them. That information comes from research done in Japan.
And so people are freaking out because some have turned up in Washington state.
Right. Yeah. So this has been kind of interesting for entomologists because we've known about this for a little while now, and then the news picked up on it. And what happened is 2 confirmed sightings occurred in British Columbia, Canada,
Okay.
Around Vancouver Island, and that was in the fall of 2019. And then Washington State Department of Agriculture, they found 2 more specimens confirmed in December of 2019. So there's 4 confirmed sightings of them that all occurred in late 2019.
Now, were these deceased specimens? Were they dead?
I don't have the details on that. They haven't released a lot of information about it. But I believe that at least one of those specimens was actually euthanized, essentially. It was found and identified as a non-native species, thus prompting a major investigation from federal and state agricultural officials.
So they're okay. Why do you think the story picked up? I mean, because why?
I don't know. I don't know. Part of it is, despite a lot of misinformation coming out about it, it's a good thing that people in Washington State are definitely aware of it now, because they're going to be able to create a program where people can basically send in pictures. They can make sure that they know what the hornets are that are in their yards or in their homes, around their homes. So it's a good thing for outreach that this picked up, because people know about them now. It's unfortunate because we've got folks in Massachusetts who are freaking out over a bumblebee. Really, all we need to do is communicate to people in Washington State. I think part of the reason that this has gotten attention recently is because it is spring throughout much of the country. It's warming up. This is the exact time of year that we need to be vigilant and looking out for these organisms.
So, and I think most people are nervous about, I don't think a lot of people, I mean, some people are caring about the environment and the detrimental effects, but I think the majority of people are probably freaking out that they're going to be killed by this hornet. And I read somewhere in Japan, they kill like 30 to 40 people a year.
Yeah, so that I believe there were 42 people killed in 2013, which was a year that had a major outbreak, essentially, in Japan. They don't necessarily kill all that many people, and when you consider the population density of those areas, they're really not a major threat. You're more likely to die from many other causes. A hornet is not necessarily high on your list. What does happen is that people who are allergic already to insect stings can go into something called anaphylactic shock. And that response can cause your throat to close, it can cause trouble breathing, and that is where a lot of the mortality occurs from insect stings. So it's not that the stings, the venom itself is super, super toxic and it just takes you out. It's your body's response to that venom. If you have an anaphylactic situation, that's when you could see that kind of mortality occur.
Okay, but it's having people. I mean, scientists are really, really nervous because this could really impact just our native animals. Can we talk about? I mean, and especially honeybees. This is a quote: "A colony of Asian giant hornets can kill nearly 30,000 honeybees in just a few hours."
It's absolutely remarkable, and that's where the name murder hornets actually comes from. Is that these hornets can essentially decapitate honeybees at an extremely rapid pace. And they've got these massive mandibles that just snips right through them. And it's really an incredible thing to see. If any of your listeners haven't watched videos of them doing this, absolutely, go to YouTube, look up Asian giant hornets and honeybees, and you can see the mass destruction that these organisms can have on a honeybee colony. Invasive species are a huge risk for the United States because we do so much agricultural work that we produce a lot of food. And that food and the production of it can be affected by invasive species. And as you know, honeybees, while they're not native, we actually brought them over from Europe, are really critical for a lot of our agricultural systems. So if we have a new invasive species like the Asian giant hornet come in and attack our honeybee colonies, which are already suffering from colony collapse disorder, varroa mites, lots of different threats, that could really be the nail in the coffin for some of our honeybees. But the good news is we're overreacting a little bit. We want to make sure that we take these hornets out, but at the same time, it's not like we've got a full-scale threat on our hands yet. We only had 4 sightings occur last year.
Yeah, I didn't realize there were 4 sightings, and I actually posted a TikTok video, and someone immediately had to comment, and I think they only said that there was only 1 at the time that had been reported, and I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, this is, crazy that we're just like freaking out that these are buzzing around, and, and people are like, oh, now we have murder hornets along with the coronavirus and all this stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It captures the imagination of people for sure.
It does. What do you think? So many people have sent me the Coyote Peterson video of him being stung. What do you think of him doing that on YouTube? What are your thoughts?
So someone I really respect is Justin Schmidt, who did the Schmidt Pain Index.
Okay.
He had lots of insects sting him for scientific purposes. And the unfortunate thing about Coyote Peterson, I think, is that it in some ways encourages people to do the same kind of thing, which, as I was talking about earlier, if you have an allergic reaction to a sting, that can be an extremely dangerous situation.
Uh-huh.
What I can tell you is that these hornets are known to have a remarkably potent sting. It is a incredibly painful experience to go through. And I think Coyote Peterson demonstrated that in that video.
Wow. Okay. So what is your end message for people, I guess, who are watching this? I mean, should we be worried? What can we do to help?
Well, so there's a lot of things that you can do to help. Now, first of all, if you're on the East Coast, just don't even worry about it at all unless your officials tell you that there's something to worry about. For those of us in Western North America, and in particular Washington State, you just want to be vigilant. And, if there's a 3-inch long wasp flying around, you're probably going to notice it. And if you do notice that kind of thing, report it to your state agricultural agency. What I will say is it's very premature to just start killing large flying insects. And we've seen the really unfortunate death and reaction from people, which is understandable, of them actually killing something like a queen honeybee, which I misspoke there, a queen bumblebee, which are out right now trying to build new colonies. And those are our native bees. They're critically important to ecosystems. And unfortunately, because of some of the misinformation that's gone out due to this the very rapid kind of pickup of this story, we have seen people killing insects that did not need to die. And because we've already seen declines in insect populations, this is a really bad time for us to start just killing whatever we see. So my big takeaway for your listeners is just to say, if you're in Western North America, keep your eyes out, report any sightings to your Department of Agriculture. They've all put out websites at this point of how to identify these murder hornets or the Asian giant hornets. Go to those websites, visit them, educate yourself, and then just be vigilant. It's not something to be afraid of.
Yeah, we just missed something major. I just realized this. How did they get here?
That's it. Yeah.
Like we just like talked about this, and it's like, wait, this is the people
Sure.
are like, how did they get here from Asia to British Columbia and Washington? So let's talk about some of the theories.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it's not one that I think anybody's able to answer decisively right now. Invasive species, especially invasive insects, have lots of different ways that they can come to new lands. And like, for example, Hawaii. Hawaii had no native ant species prior to human colonization. And when we came, they came. And that same sort of relationship has existed with humanity all across the world. So invasive species are not a new concept, but they pose a unique kind of threat. And with this wasp, they probably came over in like something like a shipping container, maybe some agricultural products. There's also an interesting theory that people actually brought them to farm them to eat them, because there is some culture built up in certain Asian countries of eating these hornets. And that's something that's definitely going to be investigated, but it's not necessarily something that we will ever get closure on.
They're eating them? I mean, are they like, are they frying them? Or are they eating them? Like, how are they? Can you explain how they are consuming these? I don't understand why in Asia I feel like they're eating everything. I'm sorry, but I just feel like they're just eat a lot of exotic species. And I know that's not for everyone, who lives in Asia, but how are they consuming these hornets?
That's a great question. And, I think that there's some variation on that. I definitely have seen some posts about them being fried. I've seen also posts about them juicing the hornet, so essentially extracting the liquid from the hornet's body, which I would admit is probably a more pleasant way to consume them. And as an entomologist, you have the opportunity to eat a lot of insects, and it's not something that I get excited about doing generally. But one of the things about it that I think grosses people out the most is that hard exoskeleton, the carapace, and crunching through the insect. So that is one way I think that they get around doing that, is actually just taking the liquid from the hornet. And these are huge for insects, so they're going to have a lot of liquid.
Oh my God. I mean, so juicing them, which means I'm assuming they just crush them?
That's my impression. Yeah.
Okay. Well, wow. This is crazy. Well, Miles, thank you so much for coming on to just talk about this. And we're going to expand this conversation on my podcast, Animals to the Max. So if you do want to continue, please make sure to check out Animals to the Max episode with Miles. We have a lot of really interesting stuff to cover with your career. And you can listen to the Animals to the Max podcast on all major podcasting platforms. Really quick, before we end this video, how can our viewers follow you? What are your social handles?
Absolutely. So you can check out the Ant Network. So you go to YouTube, just type in the Ant Network. You'll find our documentaries, our experiences in places like Madagascar, Northern Idaho, Montana. We do a lot of videos and documentaries there. You can also follow me personally on Twitter or on Facebook. It's just going to be @MilesMaxcer. And really, if you come and join us on our social media platforms, you can learn more about the wonderful world of insects and why we don't necessarily have to be afraid of them. We can incorporate them into our daily lives and learn more about them. They're a great opportunity to learn more about the natural world right in your backyard.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
All right. Dude, that was great. That's for IGTV, and it's perfect. That's at 14 minutes. Let me just make a note right here, and then we'll just go right into the to the podcast interview. And it'd just be, I'll just put it all together. Obviously, I'll edit this stuff out. So, all righty. Miles, thank you so much once again for coming on. I know we just did an IGTV talking about the Asian giant hornet, and I'm so happy you actually you reached out because you were watching my live animal late night show, Animal Nights Live, and you kept on commenting, and I was like, wait, an entomologist is watching this show, and I was so excited.
I have so much fun learning about other people who work with animals. I've loved animals my entire life. And I've had the pleasure of following your work for about a year now. And I've got a buddy over who's going to school at Boise State University, and that's how he learned about it. I was like, I'll check this out.
Oh, yeah. And
And that was a lot of fun.
I did some. I'm, by the way, super impressed by you. By the way, your YouTube channel is awesome. Your content is great. I spent this morning drinking coffee, watching a few of your videos, and so you basically, so you are, as I mentioned, an entomologist, a science communicator, and founder of the Ant Network, a science communication company, and you're also known as the Ant Explorer. And can you just take me back? I mean, have you always loved insects?
Corbin, what I'll tell you is I've always loved animals. And I know you can relate to this. Steve Irwin really was my idol, still is a fantastic inspiration, somebody I think about every day. And as a kid, he was always on TV talking about loving the animals that don't get that much love. So, we've got pandas, we got elephants. People really love some of these charismatic animals. But then, just as you know, you've got snakes, you've got crocodiles, and you've got insects. And these are animals that don't necessarily get as much appreciation from the public. And I ended up thinking, wow, insects are really cool. That being acknowledged, back in second grade, so early primary school, I was out on recess, and I wasn't ever that into sports. And I think that's something that a lot of biologists can relate to.
Oh, yeah, me neither. It just wasn't a thing that was going to work out.
No. So, and it turns out that's okay. It didn't feel nearly as okay at the time.
Yes,
but,
yeah, that is very. I'm happy you said that. If you're not into sports, that's fine. Do something else. You do not have to be the all-star, quarterback. And now they're suffering from all these brain injuries. And anyway, so we're fine. You could be.
That's right.
You can love science, and Okay, go ahead.
Well, and Corbin, I'll tell you this. I was talking to a friend a couple days ago, and we were out hiking, and I was like, sometimes I think I can understand not like being a biologist, and then I go on a hike, and it's like I don't understand it at all. I don't. The natural world is just an absolutely fascinating place. But I want to take you back to second grade.
Yes.
So I'm out there. We're trying to play. I think it was soccer. I was the last kid picked. So I was sitting in the lawn, just kind of pulling grass, looking at ladybugs. Turns out I sat right on top of an anthill, didn't notice it, and they flooded up through my clothes, started biting and stinging me all over the place. And of course, I freaked out. In second grade, very young. Ran over to the playground supervisor, and she immediately took all of my clothes off except for my underwear.
Oh my God.
As you can imagine, that got a lot of attention. So at this point, there's literally hundreds of kids all around me.
Oh no.
Watching, laughing, also many of them horrified for me because of just being bit and stung everywhere. And the supervisor takes my shirt and starts hitting me, trying to get all the ants off of me.
Oh, shoot.
So, of course, I'm sobbing. I run into the school in my underwear, go into the bathroom, get all of the ants off of me, and I hated ants for years. Always loved animals, but ants was like, those guys wronged me. That was not cool. So, and then about 4 years later, so sixth grade, our teacher gave us a really unique assignment, and that was to learn about something that you didn't like. And then at the end of that assignment, justify whether or not you were right in not liking that thing, or if you learned more about it and decided that your prejudices were wrong. And I got an ant farm, and I have been studying ants ever since. I was just absolutely infatuated by them at that point. And that's really been a huge driver of my career, is that very early experience.
That is the neatest project I have ever heard in my life. A teacher made you do an assignment on an animal, something you did not like, and then see. That is so, wow, that teacher should get an award.
I absolutely agree.
I think everyone should do that. I mean, that at a young age, too. You said sixth grade?
Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's great.
And you learn to challenge your prejudices and realize that you can be wrong. And that's okay. And some really cool things can come out of that process.
So you were obsessed with ants. I mean, this is just, they are so fascinating. And I mean, I still, and by the way, I can kind of relate. In college at Boise State, I took entomology to fill in one of my courses. And I was just over the moon about insects. I couldn't even believe it. It opened up a whole world, which I had never even really honestly paid attention to.
I hear that a lot. People don't necessarily recognize insects as animals or something to be studied, but 3 out of 4 species on Earth that we have documented is an insect. Okay, there are 200 million insects for every human on Earth.
Wow!
So it's critically important that we understand a lot more about insects than we do. And just as we were talking about earlier with the murder hornets, if people have a better understanding of what insects do in the environment and how important they are for our livelihoods, I think we would appreciate them a little bit more.
Yeah, let's talk about how we can appreciate them, because I know a lot of people are listening to this thinking there's 200 million insects per person on Earth, and I know a lot of people are like, ugh. So, Miles, let's talk about this. Why are insects good?
So insects are E.O. Wilson is a really well-known biologist and ant researcher, and he says that ants are the little things that run the world, and that's really true for insects in general. We really love seeing something like African elephants, right? These big, charismatic animals. We love seeing dolphins in the oceans. But if you want to talk about the animals on Earth that are the most important for keeping ecosystems in check, it's insects. And part of that is because they are so ubiquitous. There's, like I said, there are 200 million of them per human. So the influence that they have on ecosystems is massive. And if we respect that, I think that we will do a better job of producing food, of ensuring that our natural areas are healthy, our ecosystems are functioning. And one thing that's great about insects is that they are accessible to basically everybody. You know, I was in Central Park last year. There's insects all over in Central Park. There's lots of different opportunities to kind of go on a safari in your backyard. And you see different insects. Some of them have been around since the dinosaurs, since before 200 million years. And you can really, I think, start to understand how the natural world functions by looking at, observing, even keeping insects as pets.
Wow, next time I'm in New York, I'm going to look for insects. I mean, by the way, in New York, I try to avoid insects. We've had like cockroaches in our hotel room. Dude, that was not fun. Insects in Central Park. Next time I'm going to do it, man. I'm going to look around. I'm usually looking for turtles or rats. I mean, which you see a lot of, but that's interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, usually when I'm walking on the sidewalk, my head is down, and that's not because I'm sad. I'm looking at whatever's running around on the sidewalk. But if you take a little bit of time and just look around, you're going to find insects and other arthropods and arachnids like spiders all over the place. And I think that recognizing that they are everywhere should give people a little bit of comfort that they're not actually as scary as our culture likes to make us believe, because they are everywhere. And we don't necessarily have tons of negative interactions with insects. They're there making things run, and we don't necessarily see it. You might drop a ice cream cone on the sidewalk. Well, you know who's going to come clean that up? The ants. They're going to come and clean up that food, and they do that in ecosystems all over the world. They're basically the little janitors of the world, and without them, our lives would be very, very different.
I'll never forget when I was in biology 191. And we had these beetles that we were working with. We were counting, doing some population study or something. I remember one of them got loose and scurried across the lab floor, and one of the students sat and just got up and smashed it. And my biology instructor, she was just horrified. She was like, "Why did you do that?" I mean, and she had an Argentine accent, which I just butchered. But yeah, but I was just going to say, I mean, it feels like it's something we're taught as an early age that insects are gross or we should squish them. Or, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And, you know, there are some good reasons why we would react that way. There are dangerous insects, especially in kind of the homelands of Africa where humanity evolved. There's a lot of reasons why certain insects or arthropods we would want to avoid. You still have something like ticks.
Oh, God.
That really can be quite negative for human health. So just like how we might have kind of a fear response when we immediately see a snake, that response is also probably ingrained in humanity. But our culture does nothing to help that. And that's one thing that I really want to do in my career is to help people understand the role that insects can play in our lives, and that they can actually be a source of excitement and great beauty for us as we learn as children. Because I can't bring the Amazon rainforest to you. I can't bring it to some kid going to school in Chicago, but I can bring an ant farm. And that can open whole new worlds into their imagination about kind of how the natural world works and their role as stewards of nature.
Yeah. So how did you go? And this is so fascinating. So you were born in Colorado, but you were raised in Idaho. What part?
That's right.
What
That's right.
part?
Northern Idaho, so Moscow, Idaho. I'll tell
Oh.
you that that's where the University of Idaho is.
Oh yeah.
So I'm doing my very best to talk to you, Corbin. I know you went to Boise State, and we got a little bit of a truce going there. Yeah. No, I was raised in predominantly in northern Idaho, a little bit
Wow.
in Oregon as well, but definitely spent a lot of time in the northwestern United States.
U of I, and you just graduated, and it's a Sunday morning, and you're doing this. I am so happy that you are not still up from the night before. They have a reputation of being like the
Well,
biggest party school.
well, Corbin, I'll tell you, I actually went to Montana State University, so
Oh.
I'm over here in Bozeman, Montana, right now,
Oh.
and
Okay.
you know, we the tagline for MSU is mountains and mines. So we get out a lot, do a lot of outdoor recreation. We have fun. But we're also very serious about our academics and really the role that we play as college educated people. Something ingrained in us at MSU is that we actually serve the people. And that's something that I try to take to heart, is that as an entomologist, as a science communicator, an early career professional, part of my role is to be a servant and to help communicate complicated concepts to the public and give them the information that they need to continue going about their daily lives.
And that's, I'm assuming, why you created the Ant Network. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yep,
So
yep.
the ant network stems from my passion specifically about ants. And growing up, going to high school in Moscow, we had this program called ELI, or the Extended Learning Internship, and it was
Yep.
our opportunity to basically have an independent study,
Uh-huh.
something that we can study whatever we wanted to and find a mentor. And I studied ants. And I loved keeping ant colonies in captivity, which is kind of a difficult thing to do, but we've gotten fairly good at it as of late. And I would take these ant colonies with queens, with the babies, all that kind of stuff that you don't ever see it with those little toy ant farms. And I'd take them into schools. And now I've done over 50, I think it might even be 60 presentations
Wow.
to classrooms, science camps, that kind of thing. And the Ant Network was born out of an idea of kind of bringing ants more into the public's focus.
Hmm.
And that's part of what we try and do. We do live insect exhibits, we do presentations, and then you can see those videos on our YouTube channel, for example, where we try and reach everybody, anybody who might be interested in the world of insects.
Yes, and I was so impressed because you sent me the email and you're like, "Hey, if you have a chance, check out my channel and check out the video." And I'm like, "Sure." I go and I check out. You were in Madagascar on, doing a research expedition, and it was just so. It was really great. It was well produced. It was shot. It was in great quality. You're in Madagascar finding ants and trees, and I was really impressed. That was an amazing, short little wildlife doc. What was it, like 13 minutes?
Something like that. We try and
Yep.
keep them, under 15 minutes so that they're
Yep.
easily digestible. And I really appreciate those compliments too. We try pretty hard to produce content that's exciting,
Yeah.
and as high a quality as we can manage during those situations, because we're still trying to do research and actually effectively doing research. So it's a balancing act as a science communicator, trying to be a scientist and then also a communicator. But we've been doing our best with it.
Dude,
I appreciate that.
it looks great. When I was in college, I went to Africa for the first time in 2012. I have my handy cam, and I'm still happy with those YouTube videos. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we had. But no, it was very good quality. If you are a listener, I highly recommend checking out the Ant Network on YouTube and checking out those videos because I think they're just really really good.
Yeah, thank you very much. I got to ask you,
Go ahead.
where in Africa were you? I've been to Africa 3 times in the past year. I've just fallen in love with the place.
Oh my God, me too. And Miles, honestly, I wanted to drop everything. I've said this before, quit this whole TV media thing and just become a guide. But I have, since you follow me, I have like 30 different animals, so I can't necessarily pick up and leave all my rescued reptiles. I can't take them with me. So, but I went to Kenya,
Okay.
Masai Mara, Lake Navasha, Lake Nakuru, and stuff like that. So, where did you go?
Very cool. Yeah, so Madagascar, like you mentioned,
Yep,
and then
Madagascar.
South Africa. Um,
Oh,
and my most recent trip, I went on a lot of different animal adventures, and part of it was also me visiting a facility there called the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital.
okay.
And They are involved in the rehabilitation of pangolins that have been taken from the wild.
Wow.
And if you know much about pangolins, they are the most highly trafficked animal on Earth, which is tragic. It's absolutely tragic. And as an ant researcher, I was very interested in pangolins because that's what they eat. Pangolins are ant and termite specialists. So I got to go around, watch the pangolins forage in the wild, and actually record which ants they were targeting. And that's an area of study that I'm really interested in pursuing in the future. I do need to note, just because the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital is involved in it, the pangolins are actually kept at a off-site facility. So they're not a part of the hospital itself, but they are part of that rehabilitation process.
Wow, we just covered pangolins in a podcast a few weeks ago, and they are phenomenal. Probably one of my favorite mammals. I've been begging the Turtleback Zoo because they have a few for a breeding program to actually bring one on the Today Show because so many people are so unfamiliar with this scaly mammal. I mean, so many, and I just think it'd be a great exposure. So fingers crossed.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So let's just talk about some fun ant facts because I've listened to a few podcasts, Varmints podcast, which is a fantastic animal podcast. I don't know if you've checked it out, but they have an ant episode, and it was by far one of the most fascinating episodes. I remember my jaw was dropping with all these facts about ants, and I'm a little rusty, a little dusty in my mind because it's been several years since I was in college taking entomology. So can we go over some fun facts, maybe things that some people might not know about ants?
Absolutely. So ants, there's about 16,000 species on Earth that we know about. That's our best estimate. There could be up to 20,000 or so, but between 12 and 16,000, we're very, very confident there is at minimum that many species, which that's actually kind of low.
Yeah.
When it comes to insects, you have beetles, which I think are over 100,000 species. And it's interesting that ants have become one of the most dominant life forms on Earth without a ton of speciation. They are probably one of the most, if not the most, important groups of organisms for ecosystems, period. And without ants, we'd have a very, very different looking world. In the Amazon rainforest, for example, the leafcutter ants there can eat more vegetation in a day than a cow does. And that is wild. They're one of the top herbivores in the entire rainforest system. And they're ants, right? They're tiny, but there's millions and millions of them.
Wow.
And another thing that's fascinating about leafcutter ants is they actually aren't the ones eating the leaves. They harvest those leaves to feed to their own special fungus that they grow deep underground in these chambers that are about the size of a softball. And they basically give the fungus clean, beautiful, fresh leaves, and the fungus takes it over and produces a little bit of food for the colony. So ants were among the first agriculturalists, the first farmers, the first architects. And every time that humanity thinks that, we're doing pretty good, we're pretty cool, we're the dominant animals, we need to have a little bit of a ego check because ants have done a lot of the things that we think we're the first at doing. It was really the ants that kind of pioneered some of the complex social systems that we know about.
Yeah, I remember learning that fact years ago with the leafcutter ants, how they're farmers and they're not even eating those leaves. And I just was shocked, what? And then, just their tunnel systems and how they have different, I don't know, they have bathrooms and it blows my mind that this little organism is that, I guess, complex. Can I say that? That's,
They are.
It blew
Absolutely.
my mind.
Mm-hmm. And Corbin, what's so exciting about ants is that an individual ant really isn't that complex. It's sort of like a computer. It reads the natural world through chemicals, essentially, and different inputs, different experiences it has result in different outputs or different behaviors. But when you put millions and millions of these things together, working together towards a goal, that's when, mind blown, because you see just how complex these systems can become. And it's been really valuable for humanity, actually, to watch and learn from ants. They have helped us learn about antimicrobials. We research how they keep their colonies free of bacteria, and that helps us maintain healthier hospitals. We watch how they get food efficiently, so they effectively go out into the environment and forage. We've learned about that. Some of our transportation systems are based on algorithms developed from ants. It's incredible. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important to get people excited about the natural world. Is ants are just one example of tons of different organisms that are doing fascinating things that we can actually learn about and learn from. So humanity benefits from that kind of research.
Absolutely. So you have trademarked the Ant Explorer, which I love. So it's very okay. Okay. From my experience, because I started out with reptiles, so it's very easy for me to be like, I'm so passionate about reptiles when I'm holding a 13-foot python. Is it hard to get people engaged when you are the Ant Explorer? Are people almost like, wait, are you serious?
Well, Corbin, there's a lot of variation there. I'd say about half the people that we interact with are right from the get-go absolutely fascinated. They're like,
Okay.
really? You are studying ants?
Yes.
But it's not necessarily a negative reaction. It's like, oh, that's really cool. I want to learn more. And then about half the people are like, oh, that's kind of gross. And really my job is to bring both groups of people kind of together and to open their minds a little bit about it.
Uh-huh.
One thing that I will say, I'm a little jealous about the biologists and the wildlife presenters who have large animals, is that it's really hard to show people really small organisms. It takes a lot of equipment, a lot of training, a lot of experience and experimentation for us to be able to get the right kind of shots of the ants that will show you this is why they're so cool, right? You can see the behavior. One thing that we did in Madagascar is we found the Snapshot Ants. And the Snapshot Ants are actually known as the fastest animals on Earth. And that's not because they run super fast. They're not going to outrun a cheetah. But what they do is their jaws, when they snap together, it's the fastest action we've ever recorded from a living thing. And we were able to show that a little bit on camera. And then we also have colleagues like Adrian Smith at North Carolina State University, who does high resolution, super, super slow motion video. And what's exciting to me, kind of as an entomologist and a science communicator, is that technology is finally getting there so we can actually show you some of these really amazing things. But it remains a challenge. It's a difficult thing to do, but it also is really exciting when it works.
It is, and I'm going to be honest with you. When I'm, watching, David Attenborough on the BBC, or watching Planet Earth, or watching, they had a series Life, which I'm sure you've seen. Some of my favorite segments are the ones with ants or with insects, when they get those cameras in there and you're opened up to this whole world, and it's like, those are my favorite. I would honestly I've seen a cheetah chase and kill a wildebeest so many times, or a young gazelle so many times. That fascinates me more, honestly.
Well, it fascinates me more too. And what got me into biology was, the David Attenboroughs, the Steve Williams of the world, which I will always be appreciative of. But as I consider the things that I'm hoping to accomplish through a career, especially in terms of getting people excited about insects, I'm really excited about getting those kinds of shots. And like, for example, with the Ant Network, we have this lens that's like 16 inches long or something, and it's called a probe lens. So it looks like the barrel of a rifle, but we can actually put it down into ant colonies. And we do that at one point in both our Madagascar video and the hunt for the wood ants.
Yep.
And we're able to show you kind of the inside of the ant colony. And that's the kind of technology that we've only had for probably a couple of decades. And it's never been accessible to people until a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I remember watching, and my mom, hey mom, she's a big fan of the show, as you can imagine. She always would be like, Corbin, how did they get those shots? I mean, seriously, when they're following the worker ants back to the high, it's just, I'm assuming just intricate cameras and.
Oh yeah, and you get a lot of bad shots. I'll tell you that.
Yep.
You sometimes you get that one shot wonder, but generally it'll take a couple of hours on site to really get the right kind of shot that shows the behavior that you're trying to show people.
Yeah.
But it's all worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
I agree.
And, you mentioned your mom. I think it's appropriate to give a shout out to all the mothers out there.
Yes.
This is Mother's Day. And, I also wanted to talk about what it's like to be an ant mother. So a queen ant.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the queen ant, there are some ant species where there's multiple queens in the colony, but like your standard normal ant colony is going to have one queen. And that queen is going to be the mother to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in the case of something like leafcutter ants, millions of daughters. And what's incredible is that she is able to produce all of those eggs in her lifetime. What a lot of people don't realize is that ant queens are very long-lived. I think the longest-lived one that I know about was 28 or 30 years old in a German laboratory.
Wow.
We believe that there are some wild species that haven't been observed in laboratory settings that probably live even longer. So they are among the longest-lived insects on Earth.
She's like the actual queen. She's still kicking.
That's right, yeah. And one misconception people have about ants is that the queen's in charge, and there's probably no ant in the colony that has less power than the queen. She really does what she's told by the workers. What's fascinating about an ant colony is that it is kind of a straight-up democracy, where if they want to, say, move to a new nest site, they have to convince over half of their population that that nest site is better. So they'll actually take them there, they'll go and evaluate it themselves, make a decision, and it's sort of a voting process that they go through. And that's fascinating, right? There aren't other animal species that we really know about that actually sort of vote and work in a way where you could have tens of thousands of individuals in a society, and then they vote on what to do.
How do they vote?
Incredible.
I mean, they obviously don't have ballots, but how does an ant vote?
No, and there is some voter fraud that occurs in ant colonies. Where
Just like in our society.
Yeah, they try and sabotage the will of the people, the ants. One thing that they do is they actually will take their sisters to the new location. The sister will evaluate it for herself, and if she likes it, she will become a part of kind of the group that's trying to convince the other ones. So she'll go and get other sisters and recruit them. So it's like a grassroots movement that just keeps going on until they reach a critical threshold. But you're right. They don't cast ballots. They don't necessarily say, hey, I want you to vote yes on Prop 84. But they do essentially have a voting system on where they live and what things they kind of prioritize, which is incredible.
So what happens if a queen dies and there's millions of other, female ants? How do they decide, oh, you're the next queen?
Well, Corbin, that does occur in a couple of ant species, but in almost every ant species, when the queen dies, that is the end of the colony.
No.
So,
really?
Yeah, so another ant can't just become queen. There are a few primitive species where that sort of does happen. There's something called gamergates, but I won't get into that because it's really complicated.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if a queen ant dies, it's over. And what they have to sort of hope for is that over the years, when that colony released new winged queens and males to go and mate, that they were successful in spreading their genes across the environment.
It's over? I mean, will the ants move on to another colony? They'll die?
Yeah, and anecdotally, I don't know that we've necessarily demonstrated this scientifically, but as someone who's kept ants for over 10 years, when the queen ant dies, the whole colony just sort of ceases to function, where the workers almost look depressed. They just kind of like go into this depressed state, and the whole colony will die within a couple of months. And that's a fascinating thing that they sort of just know that it's over. One thing that some ant species do is the worker ants, they don't have sperm, so they can't fertilize eggs. They can't produce a new queen. But what they can do is lay unfertilized eggs. And in the group Hymenoptera, which are ants, bees, sawflies, and wasps, an unfertilized egg actually becomes a male. So in those cases, some of the worker ants can actually lay eggs that will become male ants, and those male ants might disperse into the system as sort of like a one last chance of distributing the genetic information. But that's a fairly uncommon strategy.
My mouth is dry. I didn't realize that after the queen's gone, it's over. I mean, is that why I'm assuming, obviously, the queen's like always super protected, right? Is she usually like deep underground?
I mean, the queen's the VIP,
Of course.
And I think the Secret Service can learn a little bit from ants, because the queen is completely surrounded in a species that has a soldier. She'll have soldiers all around her, and she can really beat the colony because she's the most valuable asset, right? If she dies, the colony's over. And in terms of biology, that's usually about passing on the genes, and they can't really do that without her. So she's really critical, and it's really important for them to make sure that she's well fed, she's got water, she's at a good temperature. And for northern ants during the winter, what the colony will do is they'll actually ball around the queen and vibrate very slowly, and that produces just enough heat to help her stay around. Another thing that ants do in northern areas, like carpenter ants, for example, will produce something called glycol. And that, while it's in their blood, it interrupts the freezing process. So it's like an antifreeze that is in their body that keeps them from freezing during the winter. So some ants have that. Other ants just go really, really deep down. And a lot of people don't know, but it turns out like a couple feet down in the soil, it's like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. It's actually warmer than you might think. So they can withstand the winter that way.
Does every ant species have a queen?
Basically.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, there's this thing about entomology and really biology where it's like you can't make any kind of generalization because there's always one of the fundamental characteristics essentially of ants is that there are reproductives and non-reproductives in the colony. That they are a eusocial insect by nature. So there are the queens, there are male ants. And male ants, by the way, they look like wasps. If you saw a male ant, you probably wouldn't even know it was an ant. And they're only present in the colony for a couple of weeks every year.
So we barbecued last night, and my wife was like, "Oh my God, there's ants!" And I was like, "Babe, it's fine." Anyway, we live out in the country, but they're the little black ants, right? So were those, and they were eating little bits of charcoal, whatever we had dropped. So those were those our worker ants?
Those would be the worker ants, and the worker ants are all female. They're all sterile.
All female.
Yes.
Really?
And male ants, like I said, they're only present for a couple of weeks in a year. They're winged. They got tiny little heads, and their only role is to mate. So every ant that pretty much anybody has ever seen, aside from somebody who studies ants, is going to be a female. And that's really exciting also to tell little girls, and when you're doing classrooms, like, yeah, that cool soldier ant there, that's a girl. It's kind of empowering, I think, to admit that this entire society essentially functions as a bunch of females.
It's going to start a new feminist movement. I mean, if we
they're way ahead of us. Absolutely. Yeah.
I had no... Okay, so they're all females. Okay, blowing my mind with all these facts. So how long is an ant's lifespan? So that ant that was eating our barbecue charcoal, whatever, how long would that little soldier ant live?
Sure. So a worker ant or a soldier ant, about a year.
A year?
Carpenter ants, it can be up to maybe 2-3 years. In some of the smallest ants, like the invasive Argentine ants, they only live for like a month or 2 months, something like that. But on average, a worker ant will live for a year. And on average, a queen ant will live between 15 and 20 years. But there are exceptions in both circumstances.
So how does a new colony start? I mean, so it just obviously takes a queen, but how is this a chosen one? I mean, I'm just so fascinated by this.
So, and this is happening probably right now. It's very common for this to occur kind of right this time of year. And I just got reports of this happening in Boise too. Oh. And what happens is the colony will produce queens and males. And both of those are in the alate form. And alate in entomology means that they're winged. Okay, so they have wings. They kind of look like wasps. They're like these weird little wasp ant hybrids to people. And what they do is they wait until the spring or summer where there's a big rain and then it's warm, like 75 degrees. It's humid. It's nice out. And they all come pouring out of the nest. They fly up high in the air in this huge kind of ball of flying ants, and they mate. And the male ants will mate with the queens, and the queens will actually mate with multiple males because they want to get lots of sperm to store, essentially, so that they can produce a colony with even hundreds of thousands of worker ants. So after that happens, the males die immediately after mating. Their only role in life is to mate. So they fall to the ground, they die, they're done. And the queens fly to the ground, and it kind of looks like they just shrug their shoulders. Their legs kind of come up, and they got these little hooks, and they just unhook their wings, and their wings just fall right off.
What?
Yeah. It's a sight to see. So the wings just pop right off. They're like mechanical. It's like a Lego brick, they just pop, boop, they're gone. And the queens go, they dig a hole in the ground, lay eggs, take care of those eggs until they hatch into larvae. They feed the larvae. And what they feed the larvae, this is so fascinating, Corbin. The thorax of the ant is full of wing muscles for that nuptial flight, the mating flight that they go on.
Okay.
Well, when you take your wings off, you're never going to use wing muscles again. That's over. So they metabolize the wing muscles and turn it into this nutritious soup, essentially, that they regurgitate to the larvae. So the larvae are fed on this like high protein diet. They in turn kind of hatch or eclose and go into a pupal state, and then they hatch into worker ants. And those worker ants will then immediately have to go and get food, and that's really how a new colony starts. And that process is taking place right now all across North America and the northern hemisphere.
Miles, this show's in its third season, and we're nearing 130 episodes, and my jaw has never been more dropped learning about animals I'm just like, what? That is so fascinating.
Well, I agree.
I just,
these are the kinds of things that you can't make them up, right?
no.
There's the truth is truly stranger than the strangest fiction. That's a saying that I really like, because you have writers who work on movies like Alien or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what they come up with is actually observed in the natural world. There's parasitoids that will lay eggs in a caterpillar, for example, and they'll burst out just like the alien does in the movie. Spoiler alert, but I think it's been long enough for that film to discuss it. And I think insects are a particularly fascinating group of animals because in some ways they couldn't be more different than us, but in the case of something like ants, they're also very, very similar. They live in these social societies.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to totally change topics here. You also have eaten ants.
I have.
Okay.
That's right. So I've eaten ants on a number of occasions. There are some ants that are actually enjoyable to eat, or at least particularly enjoyable to eat, and those are the honeypot ants of the southwestern United States. And if you have never seen a honeypot ant, you've got to look them up. They're incredible. And what they've done is these ants have evolved to store liquid in their abdomens or their gasters, basically. And they take in nectar from flowering plants during the kind of the wet season down in the desert. And they feed it to these specialized ants called repletes. And the repletes get so swollen they're like grapes, and they're see-through, they're translucent, so you can see all the liquid inside of them. Well, it's just sugar water, Corbin.
Yeah.
And I know this might sound gross to some people, but you eat one of those and it's just super sweet. It's like having a candy. So I've eaten those ants before.
Like
it's
alive,
not necessarily...
obviously. Like alive, you just
yes. But
pop them
I do
in
have a friend who preserves them in flavored alcohols as well.
Oh my
and,
god!
Can do that as well. I've got a new friend that I made, Chef Joseph Yoon, who is kind of pioneering the edible insect movement in the United States. At least he's a big part of it. And I think the picture you're referring to, we had on our social media, was actually me eating ants on an apple.
Yes.
And part of his messaging is that insects should and can be a part of our diets. I'm not necessarily sold on that, but it's not the worst idea in the world. And a lot of cultures, like we were talking about earlier with the Asian Giant Hornets, readily eat insects as part of their diet.
But is it hard for you, though? Do you feel bad? I mean, because you're so passionate about ants. Is it hard to be like, I am so passionate, I'm the ant explorer, and oh, look, I'm going to have a bite of this because this is going to be good?
Yeah. Well, that's, I definitely, the first time, Corbin, that I ate a honeypot ant, I felt terrible. Okay? But what I've learned is that as an entomologist, you sort of have to understand that in order to appreciate and research these animals, you actually have to kill a lot of them. That was something that was really difficult for me. Becoming a researcher and a scientist, that you actually have to kill a lot of insects to preserve them and to really study them.
Oh, yeah.
Something I dealt with early on in my college career is like, can I do this? And eventually I sort of figured out, I can rationalize it and understand it, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, because I remember in entomology, we had to go out and collect insects, and there were people who would catch these butterflies who just couldn't do it. They were like, I can't do it. I can't. It's too beautiful. It's a beautiful butterfly. They can't do it.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a necessity as an entomologist. So.
Absolutely. Well, we're nearing the end of our interview. It's an hour. Miles, this has been such a fascinating discussion. And I would love to have you come on maybe in a year or so and let's fill us in more on some crazy ant facts. I'm sure my listeners found this just as interesting as I did.
Absolutely, Corbin. Thank you for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then I'll include the links to all of your social channels and the Ant Network on YouTube. Once again, listeners, go check it out. It's some great videos. And Miles, like I said, I'll include the link. So if people have any other questions for you, they can contact you directly.
That sounds good. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Take care, Corbin.
You too.